A big hello to all my fellow movie hunters. I am Dusan, and my guest today is fantastic David, better known as Viking Samurai. If you haven't checked his channel yet, you don't know what you've been missing. David, thank you so much for joining us today. And first, I want to congratulate you on all your achievements. I mean, it's amazing what kind of transition you've done.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. But things have changed quite a bit just over the course of a year.
Yeah.
Now, it didn't just happen. There were seeds that were planted many years ago, and it takes a lot of work, watering those seeds and having trust and faith in the process that they're doing something underground where you can't see it. But yeah, those seeds have grown and are starting to bear fruit with the movie related things, fight related things. Yeah, and over the last year, it's been pretty wild, man.
Fantastic. My favorite saying was always luck is when preparation meets opportunity, and you certainly used that opportunity.
I love that saying as well. That's from that great philosopher Seneca from
Yeah.
thousands of years ago. It applied back then, it applies now, it'll apply thousands of years from now. It just does. So any of you guys working towards something, you never know when an opportunity will come. So do whatever you can to be prepared to seize that moment. It could happen tomorrow, it could happen 5 years from now, but you need to be ready so you can take advantage of it.
Interesting thing.
Also,
Mhm.
Dushan, I want to point out you gotta whatever you can, you gotta put yourself in a position where like an opportunity can arise. Because, opportunities they're all over. But if you don't put yourself in a position around the right people, that opportunity probably won't arise. So position yourself strategically.
Interesting thing. Last time we talked, we were just two fellow YouTubers who loved the 80s and 90s movies, martial arts, bodybuilding, everything else. But now you're a bona fide action star. You're soon to be a professional fighter. So I want to hear more about that transition, how it happened. That there was a lot of networking there, but how it all started.
Well, there was a ridiculous amount of networking, and I give so much credit to YouTube because I was able to meet so many people and develop these relationships, and one person knows another person, and it just kind of snowballed from there. Because if I rewind back, I do want to point out, by the way, I've always was interested in movies and wanted to pursue this and get involved somehow. But when I was living in LA, the Hollywood area, like a long time ago, like 20 years ago, I actually went to film school. I double majored in film editing and screenwriting. That was like my passion. I wanted to get involved with this stuff. I wasn't networking the way I needed to back then, and we didn't even really have social media that much back then, so it was a lot harder. So the funny thing is, I don't live in California. I haven't lived in California in that area for a long time. I moved to a different place in the country, in the United States, in the Midwest, some place where movie related things don't really go on for the most part. Though they are developing the region. They're starting to do stuff in Detroit, in Atlanta, and Oklahoma and a bunch of other places. But the hub, the movie hub is still for the most part Hollywood, California. But when I was out there, nothing was really happening. And I was trying, but I always just felt I'm gonna have to find a different way in. Like I just knew auditioning, going through that process, I just intuitively knew that's not gonna work for me. And it works for very few people. I knew I needed a different way in. Now, at the time, I didn't necessarily think it was going to be YouTube. So what happened a little, it happened to be YouTube, by the way, but I didn't think that it was going to lead to this. But I had started the channel, the Viking Samurai channel. Now it's probably been 4.5 years because I think I posted my first video around September of 2019 before the world shut down in
Yeah.
2020. So basically, I was in the financial industry working as a stockbroker, and I needed a creative outlet. Like I needed something more. I was bored. I mean, granted, I was working out, lifting weights, doing martial arts. I've been doing that my whole life. But I needed a creative outlet. And YouTube just seemed like it would be that outlet. because I could do my video editing and all that stuff. So remember, I double majored in film editing and
Yeah, sure.
screenwriting. And I could use some of the interest I had in editing doing like my own thing because filmmaking is such a collaborative effort. But whereas YouTube, you could be the one man show, you could do everything. So that was my creative outlet. And I started talking about my passion from the 80s and 90s action and martial arts films, Stallone, Van Damme, Seagal, Arnold Schwarzenegger, talking about their movies because that's the stuff I was always talking about. Like even when I was in film school, a lot of people don't take those films as serious. They're
Mhm.
looking at Stanley Kubrick, Martin Scorsese, guys like that. They don't take like Arnold or Stallone as serious, even though Stallone, is one of in my opinion, probably the opinion of a lot of people on your channel and on my channel, one of the greatest writers of all time with the Rocky franchise. He knows how to speak to men. Like those movies are so popular, not because of the boxing, but because they speak to the heart of man,
Exactly.
wanting to be great in their own way while we're here, not another bum from the neighborhood, so to speak. And I think every guy feels that way because there's a fundamental difference between men and women. Like women are born with value. They have youth, purity, and beauty. They're valuable. They're sought after. Men have nothing. We need to create our value. So a movie like Rocky really speaks to us because we see this down and out guy and he's a little older. He never created his value in his 20s. He's 30. He's in his 30s now, valueless to society. But then he creates that. Well, he's given an opportunity. There was definitely some luck involved, but he took advantage of that opportunity. And that movie just speaks to people. So anyway, I needed my creative outlet. And what I started doing was talking about these movies, sharing my passion. And you've been in the YouTube game for a while. It takes a while to build a channel. And I wasn't doing it to try to make money. I was hoping to eventually make a little bit of side income, but that wasn't my motivation. Which is good because I didn't even get monetized for 9 months. So I was spending all my free time outside of regular work, the gym, martial arts, all my free time outside of that to the YouTube channel, developing it, getting better at making videos. But I was motivated because I'm just passionate about talking about this stuff, as you are, and
Mhm.
as is your audience and my audience who watches this videos that we make because they know we're sincere in sharing this. And I've always called it a brotherhood. The people who are into Van Damme, Steven Skull, Stallone, it's like a brotherhood. You just if I know somebody loves the Rambo movies, I already like them, you know? Like how could you not? We got that in common, right? Those movies speak to us in certain ways. So anyway, the way the channel evolved was I had made a video about Steven Seagal and Gene LaBelle because there was that infamous story about Gene LaBelle, choking out Steven Seagal on a movie set, which actually never happened, and I didn't think there was truth to that story. And there wasn't because I actually interviewed the first guy I interviewed has now passed away, unfortunately, the late Stephen Lambert. He was a stunt guy. He was one of two stuntmen on set. There were very few people who witnessed any interaction between Steven Skull and Gene LaBelle. Another guy was a stunt coordinator, Conrad Palmisana, who had also interviewed. He had also passed away. So it's kind of a sad thing because our childhood growing up with these movies, like these guys are old.
Yeah.
There's quite a few people over the course of 4 years that I interviewed that are no longer with us. So I'm glad to have chronicled that history and people can watch it 10 years from now on YouTube. I'm glad I got those interviews, because those people aren't even here anymore. So anyway, Stephen Lambert, he wrote a book, really good book, but his writing, and he talked about that Steven Skull, Gene LaBelle story, but his writing partner seen the video that I made, and I referenced like a little passage in his book, and he said, "Hey, how would you like to interview the guy who was actually there and tell a story firsthand?" I said that would be wonderful. I never planned to do interviews on the channel, by the way. But
Mhm.
after I interviewed him, it got a lot of views, and I did multiple interviews with him, multiple videos talking about all kinds of stories because he had worked with Van Damme and Time Cop. Got that story. He worked with Canon Films. He was a Silver Mask Ninja in Revenge of the Ninja. He's got stories on Sho Kasui, all this stuff. So I got so many of his stories. But then people really like that format, and more people had reached out to me. See, this is the interesting thing about my channel. I've never really sought out somebody and said, I need to interview this guy.
Mhm.
My channel's almost become like a beacon, like an antenna where people were drawn to the channel,
Mhm.
and they want to share their stories. So that's kind of how it evolved, like where I just started meeting all these people and interviewing them, and they wanted to be on the channel. It wasn't really me seeking them out.
Mhm.
So, in a way, I'm honored. It's like that makes my job easier, right? That people want to be on the channel. So anyway, after that, like I said, I started developing these relationships. I'm on the phone a lot, talking to the people. So then I start meeting some of them in person. A lot of the people I met in person was at Sifu Alan Goldberg's event. He does this mega martial arts action weekend in late January in Atlantic City. So I met some people in person there, got to know them. I developed a really great relationship with Don the Dragon Wilson.
Mhm.
So funny enough, I still have ties to California because my brother lives out there. So whenever I visit him, Don Wilson lives somewhat nearby. I train I train boxing and kickboxing with Don and Dragon Wilson. So see, I started training with some of these guys. I even did some training with Billy Blanks, who I met on the
Mhm.
set of the Last Kumite. It was wonderful. And he just happens to live in that area too, near my brother. So when I was living in California, I didn't know anybody. And then I started meeting everybody, after I moved away from there. But yeah, look, it's amazing what the channel evolved into because you're talking about a guy, and they say you become what you talk about and what you think about all the time. So it's very, very, you got to be very careful with what you expose your mind to
Mhm.
because there's a lot of negativity out in the world, especially with mainstream media, and it pollutes the mind. It's like eating bad food. That's the equivalent of eating donuts and sugar for your brain when you're exposed to all the divisiveness. And in America, we got an election coming up, for example,
Mhm.
Trump and Biden. People are very, strongly on one side or the other, but it's very unhealthy mentally for people,
Yeah.
because things aren't as bad as the media projects. And, neither side is like purely evil, but people get into that mindset. It's like that can't be in your thoughts all the time. That's
Mhm.
just a toxic environment. So anyway, got to be careful with that kind of stuff. But the channel, it evolved from being a guy who was always thinking about and talking about this stuff, these kind of movies and
Mhm.
these fighters, to getting to know them, to working with them, to training with them. And yeah, like I mentioned, working with them, actually doing movies with them. And now, I'm actually fighting one of the greatest boxers of all time, Sugar Shane Mosley. You know what's funny, by the way, as far as boxing goes, my channel really popped, kind of blew up and got me on the map in 2020 from doing a video on Mike Tyson because
Yeah,
he
I
was doing that
remember.
comeback
Mhm.
fight against Roy Jones Jr. So my channel wasn't really getting any traction, any views. And then all of a sudden, that video went viral, got hundreds of thousands of views. And then all the videos I did before that started getting a lot of views because I think the way the algorithm works, it starts recommending, other videos to people. So
Mhm.
after that Mike Tyson video blew up, people started watching my videos on Seagal, on Philip Ree, on Jeff Speakman, Van Damme, like all these guys, and those videos
Mhm.
started blowing up. And then the channel's, been moving up nice ever since. But the crazy thing is, it was a boxing video with Mike Tyson's comeback, me talking about that really got my channel on the map. And now, fast forward 4.5 years, I'm fighting a boxing legend who's making his comeback, Sugar Shane Mosley. It's crazy how all that works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it was even unimaginable that something like that could happen because it's usually what we dream of, but we're never able to achieve any, how to say, whether connections or a palpable way to enter that zone where we can realize our true potential because you constantly work on yourself, but you can never tell whether you'll see that opportunity at some point. But sometimes it happens, it just unfolds. You're just thrown in and something is just connecting you, it's relating to you, and everyone is reaching out, they want to make something out of it. And the same thing is happening here, because have you ever imagined that you'll be able to meet those stars and work with them, and it will lead to even more opportunities for you to grow?
You know what's interesting? Because they're like, I got tested and there were like rough patches through this journey.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, last year, there was, I'll say about over 2 year, 2.5 years ago. Let me check. So it's 2024. Man, like time goes by so quick. It was either two, it might have been actually, I think it's over 3.5 years ago
Mm-hmm.
where I was involved. with the film project and the company that was going to come back, and I was putting all my time and energy into this project. I wrote the screenplay. I set up like all these meetings. I raised some money for the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was doing this for 2.5 years with very little result. I mean, I'm proud that I finished the screenplay. It was a great screenplay. Sheldon Lettich, who's
Mm-hmm.
very honest, he will tell you if something's good or bad. He said he loved that screenplay. It's called Blood Phoenix. I
Mm-hmm.
plan to make that at some point next year. I even shared the screenplay to Bay Logan, famous Hong Kong producer. First question he asked me, did you really write that script? Which is a compliment,
Yeah,
although
yeah.
a backhanded one, because he's. I mean, it's a weird compliment, right? Because it's like he thought as a writer himself, this is really good,
Mm-hmm.
but he doesn't know my background. Like I did major in screenwriting, so I'm not just a guy that wrote. Like I understand the mechanics of screenwriting. Doesn't mean you're going to write a good story, but it looks professional and it is actually a good
Mm-hmm.
story. And one thing I always talk about, you have to have a character that people care about. That's why Rocky is so popular. That's why Rambo is so popular. It's like there's thousands of movies like Rambo with the guy blowing up and shooting and killing a bunch of people. That's not why Rambo is popular.
Yeah.
Rambo is popular because Rambo is a real character. At least he seems like a real character, and people can connect with that. Because if you don't care about the character, you're not going to care about anything that happens to him. So you're emotionally checked out of the story. Like they call movies motion pictures. They should
Mm-hmm.
really be called emotion pictures. They have to evoke certain emotions out of people. That's how you remember things.
Yeah.
Rocky moves people. Rambo moves people. Thousands of other movies that are similar to that do not move people because people don't care about the character.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's one thing that Blood Phoenix has, and that's what I made sure that it has the character that you could actually care about. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I was working on trying to get this film made. I had a partner at the time that I was involved with, and we were going to get this movie, made together. Long story short, without going into too much detail or naming names, there were a lot of red flags related to the guy, and he was saying and telling me some stuff that wasn't entirely truthful. Which, if you're involved in the movie or fight world, you'll hear a lot of talk, and a lot of that talk's not necessarily truthful. I've over the course of my journey, I've run into so many people that you could call BS artists. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
BS talk, talk, talk. These people never act. They don't, and they'll say things that aren't truthful. You got to filter those people out over time because you're not going to ultimately be able to do anything with them. Anything I'm involved with, I gotta find the right people. And luckily, I've found a lot of the right people that are motivated, that put the work in, that are actually legitimate, as far as their backgrounds go.
Mm-hmm.
But long story short, this is what happened. I was relentless on this project. I had written, and it wasn't just like a first draft. I did multiple drafts to make sure the screenplay is just right. And I had raised some money for the movie, and I'm on the phone all the time. I'm on Zoom calls all the time. This is 2.5 years of my life putting all this time and energy with no payoff. So one thing that happened to me last year, and I don't resent my wife at the time, who's now my ex-wife, by the way. I don't resent her for saying this. From her perspective, it makes sense. She had told me last year that this pursuit that I was doing on trying to get this film made that I wrote
Mm-hmm.
was a stupid childhood dream that's never going to happen. And that was like a dagger to the heart because I know she meant it.
Yeah.
So this is the person who was closest to me. Outside of being my wife, she was my best friend. If somebody else said that, it doesn't really hurt. It's like, whatever. People are going to say what they're going to say. A lot of people would say that and think that because what I'm trying to do is like a million to one shot.
Mm-hmm.
So I could care less what other people say, but the person closest to me said it and meant it. So I had a bit of a nervous breakdown where I had to realize in the course of 2.5 years, did I just waste all my time and energy? All my extra time and energy, which could have been used towards something else that potentially would have paid off in that time frame. But luckily, after having some thought, and really being tested,
Mm-hmm.
I decided to keep with it because I was almost going to quit everything. I was going to quit my YouTube channel. I was going to stop doing all this networking because it wasn't leading to where it needed to lead.
Yeah, yeah.
And you only all of us only have so much time on this planet to do something, and hopefully it's not a wasted effort. Now, all of us have
Mm-hmm.
failures along the way, and you might have, oh, that was a waste of a year. That was a waste of 3 years. And okay, so I think what I was talking about is that I was on this pursuit for like 2.5 years. And I had trust and faith in the process. Like I had to, but you start, you know, the faith starts to wane when you're putting all that time and energy, but you're not seeing anything. Like I just had to trust the seed that I planted underground was doing its work, and I was watering it, but it wasn't sprouting out of the ground. Now, my wife at the time, who's now my ex-wife, she did not trust the process or have any faith. I remember she used to yell at me to get off the phone because I'm spend so much time and energy, and there's certain calls like I have to take. Like I work on this stuff all day, like every day, relentlessly. And this is just something that I think the audience should hear.
Yeah.
If you want something bad enough, you gotta be obsessed, and you have to have a level of obsession, and you got to try to figure out a way. But they say patience is very valuable because I mean nobody likes to be patient.
Mm-hmm.
They want things now, right? We have that like instant gratification society where you could almost get anything. Like you could just order whatever you want, it'll be here the same day or the next day. Like we have that kind of life. We expect things. So I think a lot of people, especially younger, don't have patience because a lot of their life they didn't have to. But when you're working on something like that I'm working on, for
Mm-hmm.
example, like that stuff just doesn't happen. It takes years, man. Like when we talk about, these different films, you got so many great movies and posters in
Yeah.
the background. I got a bunch. These things just don't happen overnight. Sometimes it's 4 years in the making. Like it could be half a decade in the making. It's a big chunk of your life.
Yeah.
But hopefully you're making some kind of progress in some way just to make sure that it's not wasted time and effort. But I believed with what I was doing was going to lead to something. I didn't know because it didn't happen, but I believed, and that's where faith comes in. And speaking of faith, I officially became a Christian last year on December 19th.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel everything I was put through was just a test of how bad I wanted it. Because I feel like God uses people, right? And I felt like he used my wife at the time, the person absolutely closest to me, to really test my resolve.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how bad does this guy want it? Like, I'm going to use the person absolutely closest to him and try to crush his spirit just to really test him. And this is why such a small percentage of people make it. There's probably so many, well, not probably, I could pretty much guarantee there are so many people who are probably that close to making it, but going through something that I did last year, like that was their breaking point and they gave up. And that's why you have like a 1% success rate of people who've really accomplished and done what they wanted to do and set out to do. Because the rest of them, there's a certain percentage that never really applied themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But there's that other percentage that did, but they just like they were pushed to the limit. They've put enough time and there's like, okay, that's it. I can't do it no more. But I'm telling you, those people, you know, they could have made it. I do believe if they hung in a little bit longer, they probably could have made it.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, I'm gonna be in that 1% statistic now that I did hang on a little long by a thread, mind you. By a little thread, I was hanging on. I didn't have much left. Um, and yeah, 2 months after that conversation, by the way, I was in Germany doing the last Kumite.
Yeah.
And then I did Bloodstorm and then Warrior Island. And this year I did Elite Target. Now I'm doing that Sean Lettish movie, A Mouthful of Knuckles. There's a good chance. And that movie we're going to shoot right after the fight in October. Now there's a good chance also from discussions I'll be working with Bay Logan. And all these things are just setting me up for 2025 because you want to keep like,
Mm-hmm.
accelerating and moving up, so to speak, up the ladder, right? So yeah, and it was crazy too, as far as like the fight stuff, because I was simultaneously trying to do two things that are not easy to do, especially as you get older. Sometimes when you get older, a lot of things like the window starts to close, especially when you're trying to do more physical
Exactly.
related things. If you talk about action movies, that's more physical related. If you're talking about like fights, that's more physical related. And I was training, like I had my idea for like getting a big fight years ago. I planted that seed, I put it out in the universe, and what it's grown into is actually even exceeded my own expectations. Like it's pretty wild. It's a very I do believe it's my destiny. Like there's a very long story related to the Sugar Shane Mosley fight. Very long, very interesting, but like it's my destiny. Like the universe put me and Mosley together for a reason. And this was another test, by the way, because I had torn my bicep
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
in late November. And there was an opportunity for me to do a prospect match on the celebrity boxing platform in March, on March 9th, which this wasn't even fully recovered, by the way, but it was good enough. It was good enough. And I knew if I was the aggressor and I used the right lead, like I'd be fine. And it worked out for me. And had I not done that, I wouldn't have this opportunity now on September 28th. But this was another huge setback, especially at my age.
Yeah.
I remember last November sitting on the couch at my buddy Brian's place in Philadelphia, black eye, beat up from sparring, torn bicep, which the black eye, whatever, that'll go away. I'm not worried about that. But the torn bicep, you're talking, you got to have surgery. You're in a cast for like 2 months.
Yeah.
That's a setback. So, anybody who follows my Instagram, Real Viking Samurai, they'll see my stories and my posts. I'm still training with the cast. I'm just doing stuff with one arm, doing my legs, doing boxing, doing my kicks with one arm because I'm not going to stop training. I'm going to do whatever I can and work around that injury. So, but that was another test because even my wife at the time, ex-wife now, was saying, "You're too old to do this. Look what happened. You got injured. You should quit." But as soon as that happened,
Mm-hmm.
quitting was not an option. My mind was like, I'm more determined than ever to see this through. This is a minor setback, another test from God. I'm going to prove to him and everyone else that I am determined and going to do this. And now I'm being blessed.
Mm-hmm.
I've gone through the trials and the tests. Now the blessings are starting to come. Now, don't get me wrong, the fight on September 28th is going to be the biggest challenge of my life.
Yeah.
You're talking about one of the greatest boxers in the world. Like I'm a lifetime martial artist, but I'm not a boxer, let alone an elite boxer like
Yeah.
him. But I'm going to be by September 28th because it took me a while to find the right team. I have the perfect team for me. Like the team that I got in California in Woodland Hills at Phil Polina's gym. Phil helped bring up the Paul brothers, by the way, Jake and Logan Paul. He's
Mm-hmm.
trained so many greats. He may not be the perfect guy for somebody else or the perfect team. I know for a fact, sometimes you just know, like the way you mesh, the way his style is, his personality.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know he's going to take me to the top. So I'm so excited to start the full camp next week with him. He knows exactly what he needs to do with me in 3 months. So we have a good, realistic shot at Mosley. Because people would say, oh, there's no way. I've seen you fight. I've seen your boxing. There's no way you could beat Sugar Shane Mosley. Well, they have a very limited mindset. Do
Yeah.
they not realize I'm going to evolve and grow significantly in the course of that training camp? I'm not going to be the same guy I was on March 9th.
Yeah.
Well, for one, I'm going to have both arms. For two, my boxing skills are going to be 10x. They can be 10 times better than they were on March 9th. I know that. But people have such limiting beliefs that they project on other people. It's like, why would anybody think I'm going to be the same guy on September 28th than I am today? I'm not. Neither are you, or neither is anyone else in the audience. Or at least they shouldn't be. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
them probably will be, or they may even degress because they have that mindset. So they're probably going to be static or actually be worse off in 3 months. I'm going to be significantly better because I have a
Mm-hmm.
growth mindset and self belief. And I already know the training I'm going to put myself through. There's a whole plan in place, there's a strategic plan. So, anybody who wants anything with goals, you got to have a plan and you should write
Mm-hmm.
that down. Anybody should write that down. Keep yourself on track because I believe in human potential. And the people that I've interviewed on the channel, the stories they shared, they've seen a lot of their human potential. And that's what, I'm inspired by that. So are you. And the guys who watch Stallone movies and Van Damme and seen and heard their stories and other people involved in these projects, right? And even the fictional characters that they play in movies, it's inspirational stuff. And basically I've become completely a part of this world in my own life, and I encourage everybody else to do the same. Do not put limiting beliefs on yourself. Society does that, your friends do that. the media does that, but each individual needs to break out of that. They need to break out of that, because like a lot of people would say, oh, that why is this guy fighting Shane Mosley? He doesn't deserve to. Well, they'll never get something like I did because those are beliefs they have on themselves that they're projecting on me. I networked my way into this. I talked my way into this. I met the right people to do this, but I'm putting in all the work. I'm putting in all the work. Like that boxing, the full camp is going to be insane. I'm going to be doing boxing 2 or 3 hours in the morning, another
Mm-hmm.
hour or two of strength and conditioning at night. So I'm going to be ready come September 28th. But see, I talked about this on my channel before. The biggest challenge is getting the fight. I got the fight, and that was a huge challenge because I am not a name in the fight world, yet I am fighting one of the greatest boxers of all
Mm-hmm.
time. It doesn't just happen, though. There's a lot of work behind the scenes to make that happen, to help facilitate that.
Plus, those people who ask the question, does he deserve this? I mean, if it happens to them, would they be willing to fight him? I mean, for some people, it's out of reach to even be in that kind of a mindset that they have to fight and they have to, how to say, to find a way to go around the challenge and not to face it bravely like some of us do.
That's a really good point, because there might be a lot of people who say, "Well, I wish I had that opportunity. I wish
Mm-hmm.
I had that challenge." At the end of the day, if they were presented with boxing somebody like Mosley, would they take it? Would they go through the camp they need to do to stand a chance? They probably would say, I wish I could do that. I would love they probably wouldn't actually step up. There's very few
Mm-hmm.
people who would step in the ring against a guy at that level because they could easily get pummeled, they get hurt, they get embarrassed. So people talk all the time, but like how many people would actually do it and put themselves through the camp to actually have a chance at beating one of the greats? I don't think a lot of people would. That takes huge commitment. And luckily for me, I'm obsessed. I'm literally obsessed. So, and I need this in my life. I need this in my life. And one thing that the common thing that guys who are in middle age do, I think they see their good years behind them,
Mm-hmm.
and what they end up doing is getting like a Corvette or a Porsche or a motorcycle. But a material possession will never give you fulfillment. I believe every man, especially at this age, needs their Mount Everest. They need their ultimate challenge to train for and attempt to climb. And Sugar Shane Mosley is my Mount Everest. That is the ultimate challenge. That's what I need in my life. That's going to make me feel alive. I need to work and train and fight for something. Literally, in this case, fight for something. And every guy needs that, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. So I'm going to try to change just middle age. It's like, you're middle aged. Don't buy your Corvette. That's not going to make you happy. Find your challenge and work towards conquering that. Your own Mount Everest, for example, whatever it may be. Maybe somebody wants to start a business.
Mm-hmm.
Study and learn as much as you can and come up with a plan and you know work towards that. That could be your Mount Everest. Everyone's going to have their own Mount Everest.
Plus, we all have different dreams when we were young, and we got inspired by those stars. So if we see those billionaires, having yachts and all the planes and everything else, those weren't the kind of people that we wanted to be. No matter how much possessions they have. We were inspired by Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Van Damme, or Dolph. We wanted to be cool, we want to be strong, to look great, to do all those moves and everything else. And now it's all up to that material stuff. The matter of having more, getting more, having luxury around you, but it's never fulfilling. You'll never be happy with that unless you're happy with what you created for yourself. You need to transform yourself in something that you'll be proud when you look at it in a mirror or in a video or something like that.
Yeah, 100%. You'll appreciate it. You'll be proud. That's the key word. Speaking of which, we're both big workout buffs. We spend a lot of time in the gym. We work out. We eat right. And I've seen an ad for something that I think is the stupidest thing ever. They have these latex muscle suits that you can put on so you look muscular. what people don't understand who would even think about shopping that, because they think, oh, if I had the six pack or I
Mm-hmm.
was muscular, I'll have confidence. What they don't realize is it's not the physical appearance that gives you the confidence. It's the work and sacrifices you made for years, training all the time, eating right, suffering. That's what builds character and confidence. Knowing you put yourself through something and sacrificed consistently for such a long period of time that most people would never do. How could you not be confident? The muscles are just the byproduct of that. They're a reflection of that lifestyle. But the real confidence is doing the work. That's what builds it, man. And one thing that I admire, like there's something I admire about all of these guys. I always talk about the Mount Rushmore of action heroes: Steven Seagal, Van Damme, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone. The thing that I've always admired the most about Arnold Schwarzenegger is something that I always wanted when I was in my 20s, didn't have it. When I was in my 30s, didn't have it. I have it now at 40. It took decades for me to develop. One thing I always admired about him is it's not his chest, it's not his biceps, it's none of that. It's
Confidence.
his confidence, that Arnold like confidence. I used to write that in my journal when I was in my 20s. It's like, man, if somebody legitimately, sincerely has that confidence, because a lot of people are fake. They may project
Mm-hmm.
confidence, but you could tell they're fake. People could just intuitively see that. But to really have that from within, like just radiating off of you, you can accomplish anything. And he did. He has, because that's real confidence. And I don't necessarily know how he got it. And very few people have that.
Mm-hmm.
But this is why I'm able to do a lot of stuff I'm doing right now, because it took me a very long time to develop, but I have that now, that Arnold like confidence. So I 100% do believe I can beat Sugar Shane Mosley,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not delusional in the sense that I don't think he's not that good and I'm really good. I know how good he is, and I know where I'm at right now and where I need to get by September 28th. And I'm very confident because I know I'm aligned with the right people and I already know my work ethic. I know my discipline. I know my focus, my self belief, everything. So, but it took me a while to build that kind of confidence. Like I said, I wish I had that in my 20s and 30s. I would have dominated back then. I have it now, luckily, you know.
I
So
really
that's
believe
something I
that
admire
Arnold's
about him.
secret is his vision. Because even when he said, when I was young, I envisioned myself as being the best bodybuilder, being the greatest, holding the trophy and everything else. Then he said the same thing about being an action star. Everyone
Mhm.
doubted him, but he said, I'm going to be the most successful, biggest box office star. And I'm going to make multi-million dollar movies, conquer the United States and world and everything else. And he became one of the biggest action stars in the world because he had that vision. And I certainly think that people need to focus on one thing at a time, because when you when you're scared around and not sure what you're doing and just do it like 10 or 20% of the time, and then you can't even find the right how to say center of your goal, you won't focus on all your energy into that one crucial moment when you have to do and achieve something. And he did. So for him, it was like conquering bodybuilding. Then I'm going to switch to action movies. Then I'm going to switch to politics. And that's why it worked with him. And he never abandoned any of those goals. He's continually investing himself in each and every one of them. But still, you need to do one thing at a time, 100%, no plan B until you achieve that goal. And then you switch to the next, but still keep an eye on the previous one and connect them. And he did it. And that was the secret.
Yeah, yeah, you can't be too scattered going after too many dreams and goals, especially if they oppose one another, you know. I mean,
Mhm.
with me, the action movie stuff and the fight stuff, actually it's the same
Right.
kind of training that I need to do. You know, so luckily pursuing those actually work, you know, in
Mhm.
conjunction. The cool thing about Arnold is I would say it's important to speak something into existence. So this is the way, like, you know, I say when I beat Sugar Shane Mosley, it's not having like an ego or being disrespectful,
Mhm.
but I have to put myself in the mindset where I have the vision of seeing it play out. You know, like I have to talk that way. Anybody who achieves something great has to talk that way. You
Mm-hmm.
speak into existence. Conor McGregor did the same thing, you know, when he was up and coming, talking about he wants two belts, which he got two UFC belts. He wanted 25 million in the bank. You know, all this other, he exceeded his expectations, but he spoke that into existence, and he was talking about it well before any of it took place. He had such a strong vision because there are a lot of people, and I even know some of these people who are too scared to speak something into existence. They're too scared to say something for the fear of ridicule if they fail. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they have a fear of failure, so they won't even say something because they think, oh, well, they'll make fun of me later. But that's why they're never going to get anywhere, man. You got to be fearless in some sense, you know? I
Yeah.
mean, if you fail, whatever, it's a part of life. You learn from that
Okay.
and you pick yourself up and you keep going along. Or if it's something that you realize, okay, maybe this ain't for me, there's always going to be something that somebody can achieve that's going to be great for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to stick with that, you know, and their objective may shift, but
Mm-hmm.
there's always got to be something that you're striving towards, because that's what makes life worth living. It makes you feel alive. I think that's why so many people these days suffer from depression, because they don't have that objective. Because we're not here simply to exist. We're not like a bump on a log. You know, you're going to exist and then you're going to die. That's not an existence. That's not a life.
Right.
It's sad. So got to pursue something that you truly care about, and people won't suffer from depression, you know. And obviously everybody has to work normal jobs for a period in their life, you know, unless you could say lucky, and some people are born into money, but for the most part, the vast majority have to do things they don't want to do. I've done that for decades,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to have that, what they call a side hustle. You have to have something that can be a means of escape from what would ordinarily be somebody's mundane life. That's what I had with the YouTube channel. Like, I wasn't happy being a stockbroker in the financial industry. I needed my creative outlet, and I realized that this could actually be my escape. I realized that later. And it basically has, for the most part, you know.
I always thought when you have your basic needs met, so you have your house, you can pay your bills, you have some money on the side, that you can do creative stuff. And then
Mhm.
you really express yourself and do something that you really enjoy. But a lot of people, when they reach certain status and have money, they don't want to invest in themselves. They don't want to chase those dreams that they had, that they once had. Now they're just getting more stuff, you know. They even say, I'm saving it for my retirement or something else. But like I said, the problem is when you get retired, you're like 60 or even more years old. Where are you gonna when you're gonna chase those dreams? You know, your body is not functioning properly. You can't do anything that you wanted to do. So it's not the right time for you to try anything that you wanted all your life to do. So for me, it's like do it now while you still can, while you're young, in good shape or whatever. Then put some money on the side just as a safety net or something like that. But chase your dreams, invest in what you like. So if it fails, it fails. But at some point, you'll be satisfied that you tried. Then you can't, you know, I always say I believe in destiny, but you can't say that destiny is responsible for something unless you gave 100%. Then when you go all out and give 110 and nothing happens out of it, then you can say it wasn't meant to be. But before that, you haven't even tried. You haven't even explored your full potential. Your dream may be waiting and you're doing something that wasn't planned for you. So don't be afraid to try it. There'll be some challenges and obstacles and injuries. And I had so many injuries, you know, while doing those workouts and training and everything else. And people usually quit. I know a lot of friends that they started, and on the first time they got injured, they quit.
Mm.
But I never did. You know, I go back. I start with 5 pound dumbbells again. You know, like the complete novice at the stuff, and then I go back to where I was. So that's the thing. I always question myself: will my body be able to keep up with my will? And a lot of people never ask themselves that question. So does it work for you on the same level like that?
I mean, I have that mindset. It's better to have tried and failed than to have never tried at all, because that's, I think, the worst thing anybody can have, especially when they get older, is to have those regrets. to look back at their life and just realize, damn, I did not take that shot. I should have took that shot. So then they always wonder, what if? And that would drive somebody crazy. Like, imagine being in a nurse. Like, if you go to a nursing home, for example, and I've been to a few because I'm also involved with like medical cells. Something I'm also doing, on the side. I'm involved with various things, but so I do spend time around older people, see them in the nursing homes. And there's usually like two types there because at a certain point, really all you have are your memories to reflect back upon your life. And you'll either have those people you could tell who just are full of regret and they're not happy. And then you have those older people who are very joyous. They've had a good life. And they look back and they replay it like old movies and they have great movies to play. Whereas somebody who doesn't, they they don't have the Rambo and the Rocky movies to play in their memories. They
Yeah,
got
yeah,
the disposable crappy movie that nobody wants to watch to play back in their memories. So yeah, people need to keep that in mind, And I think the worst thing somebody can look forward to, in my opinion, is retirement. Yet
mhm,
so many people do because they're doing and working a job or career that they hate. So they're just thinking, hey, I can't wait for 20 years and I don't have to do this anymore. But like you said, they're old. They're broken down mentally, physically. I mean, the worst, look, we're here on this planet for a purpose, to work in some way, and not to work some job that you hate that crushes you spiritually,
mhm.
but to create something in some way. So again, like I'm religious, but even if you're not, if you just look at the universe, as a creator,
Mhm.
we're made like in God's image. And if he's the ultimate creator, we're creators as well. People
Yeah,
create families, they create relationships, they create wealth, they create businesses. We're here to create something and leave something behind. That's why we're here. We're not just here to exist.
yeah,
We're not here to just utilize resources and that's it. We
yeah,
need to create something. So that's why I don't think anybody should retire. Look at Clint Eastwood. He's in his 90s. He's still directing movies.
exactly.
That gives
Because
his
he
life
loves
meaning
them.
and purpose.
Yeah,
And he's giving us something. He's creating something that can move people in some way and inspire us. So the worst mindset somebody could have is retirement because you should never retire. I mean, maybe you don't have to work the job you don't like anymore, but try to, before your retirement age, get the life that you want because there's always going to be work involved. Like you're always going to
mhm,
work in some capacity. So hopefully you can put yourself in a position where that kind of work can sustain your life because you
mhm.
do have those basic needs that everybody has those basic needs that basically, you got to have a place to live. You got
Yeah,
to have food to
exactly.
eat, etc. But hopefully you could get to the point where your work doesn't feel like work per se
Mhm.
because you enjoy it. Like you wake up, there's work to do, but it's something you want to do.
The thing is about Clint, I always liked that line that he said, I make movies that I would like to watch. And it's perfect. It summarizes everything. So you are creating something, expressing yourself, but at the same time, you're giving people something that they could feel inspired by. And Stallone did the same thing, especially with Rocky.
Mhm.
It was his original story, a life story, he poured his soul into that movie and he gave us all inspiration. We can practically feel the energy, especially when you watch Rocky Four, the training montage and everything else. You feel inspired by it. No, it doesn't matter. It's a fictional character because it's Stallone behind it. It was his original story. So why can't you do that for yourself? Why can't you express yourself the way that you want and give others back in that way? That energy could feed a lot of people. And just like I heard from many of those bodybuilders, Mr. Olympia, and they always believe that something can't be done unless someone does it. And then it's a big revelation to everyone else, and they say, now it's the new norm. Now we can
Mhm.
achieve that and go beyond. So we should all try it for our own perspective, especially now, because I like art, whether it's music or painting or films, everything else. When you create something that's a combination, like movies are, it's combining all kinds of arts into one. When you create something like that, that so many people can get something out of it. So you watch a movie and say, that was a beautifully a cinematographer of the movie. So I can be a cameraman, I can be a photographer or something like that. You read the script, you want to be a writer, you hear that music, you want to be a composer. So every time you create something that lasts, could be left for like decades after you, for those generations that will come after, and they will feel inspired by it. And the same thing is when you write a book. You know, those authors are dead. They've been dead for decades, but then you read the book and you want to make a movie out of it. You write a script based on it. So for me, it's fantastic because a lot of people don't understand how important art is and that you need to creatively express yourself and leave something behind, not just to have money now and to be famous or something like that, because people always think you want to earn because the moment you start creating stuff, you want to earn something out of it. You won't do it for free. But I want to say, to give people a chance to do it just for the sake of doing it. And whether they become famous or not, they've done something. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and for me, it's the point. It's the meaning of life.
Yeah, definitely. And, the pursuit or chasing money alone would never work. Like
Mm-hmm.
money is a byproduct of success. So putting your passion into something, your work towards something, over time, you'll be successful at it. And then the money will come anyway. Like it's a byproduct of success. So that's the way people need to look at it and approach it.
Mm-hmm.
Not just, oh, I need to make money. I want to make money. And a lot of people get into careers that they they don't want to do, but they do it for the money. And that might be fine for like a little bit just to kind of get ahead. But
Mm-hmm.
it would be sad though if people stick with that long term because again, like life is so precious, time is so precious. You always trade in time for money. There's obviously other ways to make money where you don't necessarily trade time for money, but you initially have to put times
Mm-hmm.
towards something that could generate money. But yeah, the creative pursuits, like you said, so many people are inspired by books, by movies. And, not everybody wants to be or should be an actor. Not everybody wants to be or should be a cameraman or everyone has their own God-given talents and gifts
Cool.
that they need to figure out and they need to work on, and then anybody could be successful because every one of us has,
Mm-hmm.
somebody might be an amazing chef, for example. Like I'm not. I respect the hell out of great chefs. That's not me,
Me too.
but there's
Yeah.
other people, who are. And if they work towards that and they open a restaurant or whatever someday, that's great. But everybody needs to find their thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah, it's important, man.
So I want to ask you about the movie making process with all those stars that we've been around and exposed over the years. So when you have someone like Billy Blanks and Cynthia Rothrock, Matthias Hughes, by your side, working with them, how does it look like when you appear on the set and see all those faces together? Because the Last Kumite was a big love song to those martial arts movies from the 80s or early 90s. And it was fantastic to see that choreography, to hear that music, and to see those known faces from the time. And you have the kind of story that brings it all together. So, how did you feel when you were surrounded by all of that?
Well, for me, it was very surreal. And I always like to say, I felt like that kid from Last Action Hero who
Mm-hmm.
got the magic movie ticket and then was inside the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And there could not have been a better, cooler, more exciting movie for me to be a part of. And I absolutely loved my character. Like if somebody had just thrown the script in front of me and said, "Hey, choose whoever you want to play," I would have picked this character. Like I felt like it was meant to be. So I grew up watching Bloodsport, like many of us, seen it so much. So for me to actually fight in the movie Kumite, it was crazy. And then like all these guys and girl, Cynthia Rothrock
Mm-hmm.
that we grew up watching, working alongside them, like even doing scenes with them. Like I remember even doing the some of the fight choreography where we were practicing it and Billy Blanks was there and he was giving me some tips. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
this is incredible. This guy's been in so many movies. I love this. Even
Yeah.
doing some of the acting scenes, Kurt McKinney was giving me some acting tips.
Yeah.
It was great. So everybody was so nice and helpful. It's like these are the guys I grew up watching. Billy Blank's doing all these karate
Mm-hmm.
movies. Kurt McKinney was in No Retreat, No Surrender. He did a lot of
Mm-hmm.
acting work. I know he's a really big star in Guiding Light. And it's like they're sharing what they their knowledge with me. I
Mhm.
didn't ask. Like this is just tells you like how great these people were because you never know how somebody is in real life. They're
Mhm.
generous. Like everybody was so nice, pleasant. The atmosphere, there was no egos involved. Like any of these guys could have had an ego. They were big names at some point, and obviously they're a much higher level in their careers and their accomplishments than me or anybody else on set. But they're very humble. They're very nice
Mhm.
and willing to share just like I would do in the future. I get more experience under my belt. I'm willing to share whatever I learn. Happy to do so. But
Mhm.
that's what's so wonderful being around these kind of people because you have other people who aren't like that. Luckily, that did not happen on the last Kumite. These were all stand-up individuals, and it's even hard for me to say who's the nicest. Billy's so great and wonderful. Matthias Hughes,
Mhm.
Kurt McKinney, Muhammad and Abdel Kisi, Cynthia Rothrock. Like all these people are great stand-up people. So my experience there, as surreal as it was, working alongside all these people that I grew up watching, and then being involved working with them and fighting in the movie Kumite, which was the
Mhm.
coolest thing. But yeah, it was just such a great experience. It was such a great experience because you hear about nightmares on certain movie sets. But we got along so well. And I
Mhm.
still keep in contact with him. That's why I even trained with Billy Blanks before my fight on March 9th.
Mhm.
I've run into Cynthia at different martial arts conventions. I talked to Muhammad Kisi, I talked to Kurt McKinney, Matthias Hughes. Like you keep in contact with all these people. They're great. They're wonderful people. So not only was I able to be in a movie with them, but I could develop real relationships with them that I'll have for my life, man. The rest of my life. And yeah, it's so I can't say anything. Um, really, I couldn't ask for anything better, is what I should say. I couldn't ask for like a better experience in my life. I'll always cherish that moment, and you can't put a price tag on that.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, the last Kumite was a lower budget film, and obviously no one did it to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
It just was in the budget, and I don't think that was why people wanted to do it anyway. Like Sean, the producer, put together a really fun movie, a really great throwback, and everybody was just happy to be involved, and they loved the process. Like it was work. There were 12-hour days. I would still go to the gym right after the shoot and work out for a couple hours to stay in tip-top shape, but I wouldn't trade that for anything. Like that experience, you cannot put a price tag on.
Do you think that some of those big stars get hit but they fame, so they grow into that ego, or they've been like that all along, so they just now could express themselves the way they really are? Because some
That's a really good question because money and fame would change
Mhm.
people. Like I'm pretty sure at the peak of some of these guys' careers, maybe they did develop sort of an ego, which
Mhm.
it would be hard not to if you're making a lot of money and you got all these women throwing themselves at you and everyone's paying attention to you. See, this is the problem I think that child actors have. I think when somebody is very young and in from their perspective they seem very important, like everybody cares about them, they're making money, people want to take photos with them, they're being treated like royalty, right?
Mhm.
But then when they grow up, and most child actors do not become famous actors, like their fame and popularity fade, but they're used to being treated like a big star, and then when they get older they're not, and they realize nobody really cares about them. That really messes with them, probably why they get involved in drugs and everything, because it would be so hard to hit your peak that early in life, and then it's downhill from like age 10 on. That would just destroy somebody because they're not equipped mentally, spiritually, to handle that. Most people aren't. So even when somebody get success in their 20s, it probably goes to their head. They're very young, they're very inexperienced. I think when people like Steven Seagal he didn't do his first movie till he was 38. I don't
Mhm.
think as much of it would go to your head because you're more grounded, right? Whereas someone like Van Damme in their 20s, probably a lot did go to his head
Yeah.
because he was in his 20s on top of the world. So it just kind of depends when things happen for people. I mean, there's certain ways people are brought up that they're only going to change so much, like and I could tell everybody, at least from my experience on the set of Last Kumite, none of them was ever that egomaniac. I just can't see it the way that they are now. I just can't picture it, you know.
You mentioned Steven, and he was on your mountain Rushmore. So I want to hear more about that training that you're going to have with him. Well, your reaction to Steven Seagal saying, "I'm going to prepare you for this big fight."
Well, it's again one of those things that's kind of surreal because I used to watch his movies when I was very young. I watched them in the 90s. Me and my brother would rent them. At the time, we lived on an army base, and they had the shop bet where it was like a little grocery store for people on the army base, and you could rent movies. Like
Mm-hmm.
we would rent those Steven Seagal movies, like Out for Justice and Above the Law, and then later Under Siege and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I grew up watching him and just thinking, man, he's like the coolest guy, right? And he projects that level of coolness. And because I had started taekwondo training back in the day, so I was more, able to do stuff that Van Damme could
Mm-hmm.
do. So when I would watch that, that would make sense to me. Whereas watching Steven, it seemed more magical because I can't do that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't train and it just looked so great. So you're always more impressed with guys that do stuff you can't do or you don't do.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm much more impressed with a guy playing the piano than a guy benching 300 pounds because I could bench
Mm-hmm.
300 pounds. That doesn't impress me, but I can't play the piano. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
impressed by that. So I was always more impressed with Steven Skull in a way than I was Van Damme, because I started with Taekwondo and then Kenpo karate and stuff. So it was more like Van Damme style, where Steven Skull's doing stuff that I can't do, so I'm more impressed with it. So I've gotten to know him a few years ago and I've talked to him numerous times
Mm-hmm.
on the phone and even on video phone, but I haven't met him in person yet. So I'm going to meet him in person for the first time in August and do some training. And there's a lot of really great guys who've trained with him. Anderson Silva, Lyoto Machida, more recently Alex Pereira. And they went to him for a reason, especially Alex Pereira, who just won UFC 300 light heavyweight, title fight. What I expect to get from Steven is going to be something that could definitely help in boxing. Now, I'm doing the full boxing camp at Phil Polina's gym, and Don Wilson's one of the guys that trains there. There's UFC fighters that train there. There's a lot of really great guys that train there. And we're going to be doing some really great boxing. Like Phil's the guy that I know could take me to that elite level, like
Mm-hmm.
way beyond the basics. That obviously the basics are key. Got to get those sharp. But all this other stuff that, like Roy Jones Jr. type stuff, I know he could take me to that level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Steven's going to add something very, very unique. It's going to be a little more unorthodox, something that Shane would not be expecting, because I know whatever knowledge and wisdom Steven has could be applied to anything, whether it's boxing, whether it's kickboxing, whether it's karate combat, bare knuckle, whether it's real street fighting, self defense. There's something with his involvement in the martial arts world and everyone he's trained under. You can apply that stuff if you have an open mind, which I do. So I'm very excited about this. This is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like who trains with Steven Skull? Not a lot of people.
So,
So
well,
I'm honored
who
by
trains
that
with Don the
invitation.
Dragon Wilson and Billy Blanks, you combine it all together.
That's incredible, man. Like who trains with Don Wilson? I mean, not a lot of guys. I'll tell you who trained with him. Back in the day, one of the greatest actors ever, Sean Penn.
Huh.
Chris Penn's brother, because Don Wilson's best friend was Chris Penn. So
Mm-hmm.
he spent a lot of time with Sean Penn when Sean Penn was married to Madonna. And Don Wilson has some crazy stories, as you can imagine. If you're hanging out with Madonna back in the 80s and 90s, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
have some crazy stories. But Sean Penn, was actually one of the guys, one of the few guys that Don the Dragon Wilson trained. So I'm honored to train with any of these guys, Don Wilson, Steven Seagal. I mean, not a lot of people get to train with these guys.
You said that fight with Sugar Shane Mosley reminds you of Rocky 1. So do you think that this fight will attract Stallone's attention at some point?
I actually do, because look, the press conference is going to take place in Philadelphia on July 11th. The fight is going to take place in Philadelphia. We all know Rocky is from Philadelphia. The story took place in Philadelphia. I'm the real life Rocky because I am the extreme underdog, the guy that doesn't have a name in boxing, yet I have the opportunity to fight one of the greatest fighters of all time. So it's very, very much like the real life Rocky story. So Stallone is a big boxing fan. Obviously, he knows who Sugar Shane Mosley is. He has to respect the guy. There's no way anybody involved in the boxing world doesn't. Like, you have to respect the guy and his accomplishments. He's in the Boxing Hall of Fame. He's a multi-weight class champion. I mean, he started his record at 32-0 with 30 knockouts. He put on some very exciting fights. I mean, he beat Oscar De La Hoya twice. He's probably the guy closest to ever beating Floyd Mayweather. So anybody who is involved and knows and appreciates the boxing world, 100% they respect Sugar Shane Mosley. So there's no way Stallone's not going to hear about this fight. Now, will he say anything about it? Will he comment about it? I don't know, but I know he's going to be aware of it.
You think you'll ever get a chance to make a movie with Stallone or Van Damme or Dolph Lundgren?
Will I ever get to be in a
Yeah,
movie
but
with
you'll
one of
get
those
a
guys?
chance to work with them, you know.
I I believe that's a good possibility. I think the possibility of me working on a movie with Steven Seagal is a lot higher though, because I've had discussions about this and I actually know Steven Seagal.
Mhm.
But look, anything is possible because I'm the guy that does not put limiting beliefs on myself. Like I'll even say it right now. I believe a few years from now I'm going to be as big as Jason Statham and Vin Diesel. That I believe I'm going to be at that level. I'm not trying to get to the level of these like B movie straight to video martial arts guys.
Mhm.
They even don't want to be at that. They want to be higher.
Mhm.
Obviously, anybody should want to be high. Like, and there's certain, it's a strategy though. There's certain things that need to be done. But the vision and
Mhm.
the belief is key because if you don't have that vision or belief, you will never become that. So, a few years from now, that's how big I plan on getting.
Mhm. I also believe it's the right time for a star like you to appear because all those major action stars are now too old to do that kind of stuff. And you're a great combination of someone who has the screen presence and martial arts background, the bodybuilding background, it's all combined into one person who's got enough star power. Because especially when I watched the last Kumite, you weren't in a lot of scenes, but you had that presence. And so it's a shame that you weren't the main guy in the movie because I think the movie would be even better if you were there. But from those scenes that I saw from Bloodstorm that you posted,
Yeah.
I think it's the real movie for that.
Bloodstorm is the kind of movie that they would have made in the 80s with Chuck Norris or Stallone or even Van
Mhm.
Damme. Like it's that kind of movie and I'm proud of the work that I did in that. It's a lower budget movie, but it's fun. It's
Mhm.
entertaining. I know people are going to love it and appreciate it for what it is. Like it's not going to and nor should it try to compete against like a $50 million movie. I mean, we
Mhm.
just don't have those production values, but it's fun. There's something like raw and all the effects are real. So there's a lot of blood in the movie, but they're all real blood effects. There's no
Mhm.
CGI blood or anything. So yeah, as far as the last Kumite, I appreciate the kind words in the comments, but I have heard that like quite a bit where everyone was, oh, you should be the lead. But like I said, I preferred and loved my role in it. And I have heard some good comments on screen presence, which is cool because that's not something like you could learn. Like you could learn acting. Anybody could get better as an actor, just like you could get better as a martial artist or anything else. But screen presence is, the camera has to capture you a certain way. There's certain like look
Mhm.
in the presence, like you either have it or you don't. And luckily with the last Kumite, a lot of people see that potential.
Mhm.
Now it's up to me to basically become the best actor I can possibly be, right? Because that's something I can improve a lot. Like I couldn't, the screen presence is what it is. Some people have it, some people don't. Some people might have a little bit or a lot of it, but the acting is something everybody could get better at. So I do believe I do have the ingredients to be a star because I have the screen presence. As long as I get the acting where it needs to be, which I'm working on, and as long as I get the right project, which I'm also working on, which is why I need to get my Blood Phoenix movie made, the one
Mhm.
that I wrote, because I wrote that for myself, knowing just like Stallone wrote Rocky for himself, knowing that he could play that character, right? So it's all part of the strategy. So, when I make my prediction in the future from here, it's not like I'm just saying it but not doing anything towards it. It's like, no, I'm working on the acting. I have the perfect project that will be a catalyst that I could build off of. So it's all a strategy. It's not just going to happen. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to be as big as this guy," and hope for the best and wait by the phone hoping somebody
Hmm.
calls you and gives you a role. It's like, no. My whole philosophy is if you're not invited to the table, build your own. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm building my table, which eventually will get the attention. I'll get invited to the big table. In this
Hmm.
case, it would be that big studio film. But I got to do all these other things before that so I could get the attention from the big studio that
Hmm.
invites me to the table a couple years from now.
Would you be interested in some dramatic roles as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Hmm. So, what do you believe? What's going to happen with your channel in the future when you become a major movie star?
I definitely want to keep building it, man, because I like doing the podcast. I like doing the interviews. So as the name grows in the fight world and the movie world, it's just going to expand my YouTube, audience even more. Because there's a lot of, like the YouTube channel is pretty good, but there'll be people after the Shane Mosley fight and then people who may see one of these films like Bloodstorm and then not even know I'm a YouTuber guy, but then obviously check out the channel. So I do expect the channel to grow quite a bit. There's kind of a shift here because I've pretty much am transitioning. Like I'm like a cocoon, right? Like I was a caterpillar when I started the channel, but now I'm in a cocoon and eventually going to be the butterfly as far as being one of the guys, like one of the guys that I talk about on the channel all the time. Like I'm becoming that, so it's very interesting how the channel evolved. Whereas you just have this guy, he's a fan, he's passionate about this stuff, he's talking about it. And then the evolution is like, wow, he's becoming that. He's becoming one of those
Hmm.
guys.
It would be interesting if you turn your channel into a platform where people who have certain talents can connect and make movies together.
That is an idea I've had for a while.
Hmm.
I'll throw this out here right now because I haven't really talked about this. I'm pretty sure I can make it happen.
Hmm.
So, because I want to connect back with the
Hmm.
community, right? And when you get basically what's the saying? It's like you can't help anyone else until you help yourself. But once
Hmm.
you get to a certain level, you can help other people, and I'm just starting to scratch the surface on that. So
Hmm.
one thing that I want to do, the movie A Mouthful of Knuckles, I got a really great role in there as like a villain, like a great villain role, right? This is going to be the return of Sheldon Lettich as a writer director in the action film genre anyway, because he hasn't done one of these films since, the earlier 2000s. I think his last one was probably the Hardcore with Van
Yeah,
Damme,
yeah,
right? Vivica A.
yeah.
Fox. So anyway, on A Mouthful of Knuckles, the producer and the writer is a guy named David Kurst.
Hmm.
Great guy, great guy. And this is something that Sheldon didn't want to do, but David Kurst thinks it's a good idea, and I think it's a great idea. So this is what we're going to try to do because a lot of that movie isn't cast yet. Like there are suggestions. Like we got a couple nice names that it's been presented to,
Hmm.
right? So they might be in it. Now the lead is a guy named Zach Shearer, where I interviewed him and had Sheldon on maybe 2 months ago on the channel talking about it. And I'll have David Kirst, the producer, talking about the film a little bit later, because we plan to film it in October after my fight with Shane Mosley.
Hmm.
So what I want to do, and I think Sheldon was against it because he's more old school in how he feels the auditioning should go only in person, and he thinks it'd be extra work on his part to implement my idea. Whereas I
Hmm.
it wouldn't be any extra work for him. What I feel would make the most sense and it'd give a lot of exposure to the film, and also any individual that wants to participate is at least for one of the roles, at least for one of the roles. Now, granted, this movie's kind of like Lionheart, so there's a lot of fights in it. And I proposed for one of the fighters, we would basically cast them from my YouTube channel. We would have people send in an audition tape. They would talk a little bit about themselves, a little bit about their background, and then, have a fight scene or at least show off their fighting ability in a
Hmm.
clip. And what we would do is I'd compile them, maybe say five at a time, and put the video on the YouTube channel.
Hmm.
And then, the audience can decide who they think's best. So we'll let that five down to one and we'll have another video. So let's say hypothetically 25 guys submit for it. We could have it narrowed down to five and even maybe three.
Hmm.
And then see, we're not going to waste Sheldon Lettich's time by showing him all 25 people. We'd show him the top three. and then Sheldon and the producer David Kurz can decide. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a way of giving back to the viewers and making them, involved in the process. So I think it's a really good idea. But see, here's the win. Here's what's really good for and I'm just throwing the hypothetical 25 number out there.
Mm-hmm.
These 25 people are going to be seen and get exposure because you never know who's watching the channel. There could be an up and coming director or producer or whatever who watches a
Mm-hmm.
channel. And even though that guy doesn't make it in the Mouthful of Knuckles movie, he's getting exposure. So somebody could hit him up or even me, hey, give me info about this guy. I think he'd be good in my movie. So you never know how that could work. But see, the important thing is getting yourself out there,
Mm-hmm.
which I got attention for myself through the YouTube channel and also through Instagram because I
Mm-hmm.
put myself out there. So I've had people, hit me up wanting me for certain projects. Now, are they these big Hollywood movies? No, not at this point. But you got to start somewhere. So this is a great opportunity for anybody, whether they end up in the movie or not, just to kind of further get themselves out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's that kind of consistency that we always talk about. You need to work on yourself constantly because you never know when the opportunity is gonna rise.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
never tell. So you have to be in good shape. You have to work on yourself, on your style, on your acting skills, even learn a lot of stuff, Someone has to learn riding a horse or something like that. So in the moment when they cast people, you're ready. You're just going to jump in that
For
role.
sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
So that whole process is fascinating to me, especially now with, like I say, with social networking. So a lot of those contacts are now available. A lot of years ago, you couldn't get even a fan mail to send a letter or something like that. Now you can contact them directly, send them a message on Instagram, and they reply because they pay attention. They are interested in people. So they can never tell whether there's a possible future superstar writing to them. So, and they are going to be their mentors.
Yeah, for sure, man. For sure. Yeah, it's an exciting time like right now with what you can do with social media, how you can connect. That was the biggest value that I found with my YouTube channel was yeah, it makes some money. There's some side income with ad revenue, but the biggest benefit was meeting all these people and networking and basically getting involved in this world that I grew up with and am a part of now in both the action movies and the real fights because
Mhm.
there's going to be some really big stuff after this Mosley fight because I despite what happens in the fight I know I'm going to look good. And that's going to open doors because they're going to see, wow, this guy looks really good. He looks just like a pro boxer fighting Mosley. That's going to open doors.
Mhm.
I actually I posted a prediction video on my channel earlier today talking about how I'm going to look better fighting Shane Mosley than Mike Perry looks fighting Jake Paul. There's a
Mhm.
reason I posted that video. There's a seed that I'm planting because I want that Mike Perry fight in the future, even in bare knuckle boxing.
Mhm.
There's always a reason and a strategy with stuff, whether people see it or not. I know what I'm doing. I already got Mike Perry's attention, so you
So
always got to
you're
think ahead. It's like a
going to
chess
work.
game,
Mhm.
basically.
You're going to work on your professional boxing career more, or you're going to transition into MMA or something.
I would say not MMA because the grappling would need too much work, too many
Mhm.
years to get the level I needed to get. Whereas the boxing, and I already got my kicks. Like what I would do, I would love to do karate combat.
Mhm.
I also want to do bare knuckle boxing. And another thing, well, kickboxing is fine because that's similar to karate combat,
Mhm.
except you have regular boxing gloves instead of the MMA gloves. So I do see that in the future. There's already another fight I'm talking about in December after the Mosley fight. So that's already a possibility that I'll do another fight this year after the one in September. There's already discussions, but again, everything I'm doing now, and this is how people have to think. You all this stuff you're I'm doing or anybody what they're doing now needs to lead to something bigger next year. Because the stuff that I was doing last year, I knew was going to lead to something bigger this year. Now I got kind of a slower start this year, but the stuff that I did last year, the projects, I just kept thinking like I gotta outdo that. I gotta let that build off. This year it has to build off of that.
Mhm.
And now it's starting to everything's coming together in the latter half of this year, but it took a while to really get things going. Because like the last Kumite we shot in Germany, it took a year to come out.
Mhm.
It took a year. So nobody's seen it in January or February. So I couldn't really utilize that to help me get to the next level. But now that some people have seen it, it's gotten some good attention actually. Like it's going to lead to other bigger films. I already know that for a
Mhm.
fact because it's already in the process. Bloodstorm's not even out. I know once that's out and people see it, it'll open other doors, you know. That fight that I did on March 9th, I knew that would basically lead to something bigger. I didn't necessarily think it would lead to something as big as what I have on September 28th, but I knew it would lead to something big. And there's so much behind that story on what happened because, like I said, you can't just sit back, do something, and then hope the phone rings. That
Mhm.
phone may never ring. That's why I am so relentless with this stuff. I mean, with movie related stuff, fight related stuff, there are so many phone calls. Like everybody has that power to do something.
Mhm.
Very few people are in a position where they're lucky that I mean maybe over time you can build the name where you can just sit idly by and you're in such high demand that people will call you and you have a lot of options.
Mhm.
It is very hard to get to that level. But that's what I'm working towards because again, even doing films, like getting more involved in them, not just as an actor, but even as a producer, which I'm one of the producers on Bloodstorm because I helped put it together. I
Mhm.
found the investor for it. You know, like I found the money for it because
Mhm.
the director Rene Perez wanted to do it, but one of the producers he was working with didn't want to do it with me. They wanted to do it with someone else, but Rene thought that story would be perfect for me. So I told Rene I'll find the money myself,
Mhm.
which I ended up doing in Germany. So when I got back from Germany, you know, there were meetings and Zoom calls and all that, but we got the financing for the film. You know, so I was instrumental in putting that together because if it was just like the director, hey, I want you in a movie. Okay, cool. Oh, we don't have the money. Oh, okay. Well, I'll wait till you get the money. I would have nothing in my life if I just waited. I'd still be waiting to make that movie. You know, I'm the guy that takes initiative because I know nothing's going to happen until I build my name.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm in the process of doing with all this stuff. But that's why I'm so relentless.
Mhm.
That's why I'm so relentless. And I encourage everybody to be that relentless because no one's going to call you unless you have a name. And to build that name takes years of work. And you need to do everything in your power in order to build that name.
Will you consider writing a book about your journey, kind of memoirs? We're going to put all your philosophy and challenges and everything else in for it for your readers or something.
That is a good option later on. See,
Mhm.
right now, I can't justify that. Like, I have the first couple of chapters, but I don't have a book. I do feel like the path my life is going in the
Mhm.
journey, I'll get the rest of the chapters that would justify writing a book. And I want to share that experience, you know, because I do think there's some good talks I could do as far as motivational and inspirational stuff. Because look, I'll just summarize the story and we'll end with this. My story is like a lot of stories. I'm a guy who is trying to do big things, who had big dreams in their 20s. But like most people, I failed. That could have been the end of my story. Then I would have been like 99% of people. Now, this dream got reignited in middle age. And ever since I hit middle age, I'm more driven. Like a lot of the drive dies out as people get older. But all I see in front of me is an hourglass. And I know half the game is over. If I use a basketball game analogy, I'm at halftime, I'm losing the game, but I could still win. I could still turn it around. I could
Mhm.
still do that and accomplish everything I ever wanted to do in my life. I realized that. So I never had like the typical midlife crisis per se. I had a midlife realization that
Mhm.
I could still do everything I ever wanted to do. So that's what my story is going to be. It's a guy who failed in their 20s, like most people, as far as their dreams go, but coming back and then conquering in middle age. And I think that's going to inspire a lot of people. And that if and when I get to the level that I want to over the course of the next 10 years, I'll have a book to write, a really good book.
Mhm. So maybe we can have some final words, or some kind of inspiration, motivation for everyone who's watching this. So what do you have to do to pursue that dream? How focused do you have to be? What kind of motivation you could have that you're going to, take from all of this?
I would encourage everybody to get a journal. a goal journal, like a dream journal, and write down what you want.
Mhm.
See, you got to break it down though. You got to have like a 5-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 3-month plan, because the stuff that you're trying to achieve in 3 months are steps towards what you're ultimately trying to get in 5 years. So you write it down and you look at it, you will figure out a way to make it happen. Like the unit, once something's constantly on your mind, the the universe will present you with the right stuff. The problem is most people are too blind to see it. But when you have that goal dream journal and it written down, it's constantly on your mind. So you'll start noticing things that you can utilize to help you because nobody is going to do anything by themselves, but the universe will put the right people, you know,
Mhm.
around you. They may already be here, but you don't even realize it. But you'll realize, or you will find it. Asking you shall receive. So I think the universe is very generous if people know how to ask the right way and they're actually paying attention. So that's what I encourage everybody to do to get the goal journal, write down the bigger plan, the 5-year one,
Mhm.
but then break it down because what you're doing in 3 months is going to lead to that 5-year plan. And you have to like really believe it. So I even draw in there. I drew a picture last year of me in the boxing ring doing a big fight, and that is happening now in September 28th. I drew that last year, knowing and believing it would happen, and now it's manifested into reality.
So I want to thank you so much for all this time that you and everything that you shared with us and all this valuable information and motivation to work on ourselves. And I wish you all the best with your career. And I hope to see you in 5 years as a major movie star with many successful action movies behind you. For those people who haven't watched The Last Kumite, they should definitely look for it. It's on Amazon Prime. It's available there. Your channel is always there with all kinds of information, and we'll be rooting for you on September 28th that you show us the real Rocky, from Rocky 2.
Yeah, thanks, Dushan.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of this. So it was all everything for today. See you soon. All the best.
Bye, guys.